Okay. So, hello everyone. I'm Mohammed Jafar Laden, and I work with the Energy Commission of Nigeria. We were part of the team that developed the first Nigerian calculator in 2015, and presently we are working in developing an updated version of the Nigerian calculator, which we hope to have completed by next month in October. Thank you all.
Excellent. Thanks, Mohammed. We're just conscious that we have a very limited time frame here as well. So I think rather than go through a brief introduction by video, if we could just put the text in the chat. So two things we're after here. So firstly is the country in which you're based and where you are engaged with your calculator, and then whether you have one that's being developed or that is in development. I suspect most of the team that are here will have a calculator in development or one that's developed already, but it would also be great to hear if there's anybody on the call who's interested in developing one as well. So an example you can see in the top there is Nigeria and yes. So for example, for the one that we're doing in Kenya, it'd be Kenya and yes. So if you wouldn't mind just putting that in the sidebar, just take 10 seconds to do that, and then it'll give us a better sense of who's here, and then we can start the conversation. Excellent. Okay, so it looks like we've got a strong Southeast Asian contingent on the call with us. The Philippines and Malaysia have Nigeria as well, and then of course you have Nesmus, who's got great experience in other African countries with Zimbabwe, Nigeria, and Kenya as well. So I think we could probably kick off with some of these questions. So the way that we've structured these, there's 3 questions here, but they're not prescriptive at all. We really want this to be a conversation. So this is just to get the conversation going. Please feel to jump in with any considerations you have, and the more practical your examples, the better. It just helps to really allow other countries to understand what works well when it comes to policy development. So the first question that we have here, number 1, is what are the major policy relevant insights that you've made using your 2050 calculator and when developing your 2050 calculator? So what are those major policy relevant insights that you've had? If you'd like to speak, please just start responding.
Jesus, there's a hand from Jesus. Please just speak.
Yes, just wanted to make the comment that policy, technology, and financial support from the developed countries is really needed to bridge the gap between the conditional and unconditional commitment of developed countries on emission reduction as reflected in their NDCs. The calculator program is an example support mechanism. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Jesus. And Mohammed, you had your hand up as well. Would you like to have a response?
Yes, in response to the policy insights we made when using the calculator, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, is our national energy policy existing document is very outdated, because in the document there are a number of policies that practically they will increase our emissions. Like there's a policy statement to start coal development of coal power plants, to increase oil and gas exploration activities, which presently will lead to emissions, and it's not something we want. So these are some of the things we notice in our existing document, and we hope after this calculator development to have a new national energy policy which will capture the commitments we have towards emissions reduction.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Mohammed. I mean, it's interesting hearing just how important it is to have those policies in place, but then to use the calculators as a very visible tool to be able to address them, and to use it as a way to try and encourage greater conversation and greater challenging of the assumptions that some policymakers may have by providing them with stronger evidence. I see a hand up from Dr. Gaurav Sarah.
Thank you, Gary Thesera here.
Oh, sorry. It's sorry, cut off the bottom
The
of
Y,
the
the Y is cut off. It's all right, fine. But just with respect to question number one, it's not specifically policy insight, as we are not yet at the stage where we're using the 2050 calculator for the development of policy. As you heard in the plenary discussion, question and answer earlier, we've just gone through a number of changes in government, and we actually have a energy policy in the final stages of development. And we've only recently, as a matter of fact, a couple of days ago, launched the the latest of the 5-year plans. And it's now an issue of aligning the energy parts of these various policies. But the point I wanted to make here is the need to socialize the work that we're doing within the Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Center with the current developers of these policies, to introduce the tool and to share its value, because in my understanding, neither of these policies goes out to mid-century. So the value lies in socializing this tool as a means of depicting possible scenarios that the policies would generate moving out that far. So that's what we would like to share at this point. Thank you very much.
Kind of, there's still a hand, or that's Gary's hand. It's fascinating to hear that, because kind of it's bordering on the question too already. But we also had a follow-on question about behavioral change and whether, as you're developing these tools, these are some of the things that you've started to observe, and whether these will be actually be looked into in the limelight of not just developing policies, but also on the light of the long-term strategies that various countries would have. For those who have already calculators, like Nigeria, and also for those who are planning in the process of developing theirs. Any feedback on that? Any reactions to that? I'm conscious we've not heard from the Philippines as well. But go on, Mohammed.
Okay, yes. In terms of behavioral change when using the calculator, like in the previous calculator development we had, there was the notion that we could introduce clean coal technologies. So, but right now we know that is not really possible, because even if you want to introduce coal technologies, to get financing right now in the world is practically impossible for such projects. So our energy experts are now getting the idea that clean energy, clean coal technologies is not going to be possible. So we really have to move to renewable and clean energy technologies when we are thinking of further developing our energy sector. So these are the kind of behavioral changes we are having within our experts' mindsets.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it's and I think the tool is the ideal platform to be able to demonstrate that, and how you can bring those various new sectors in. I mean, it's quite similar, I think, to what Dr. Gary was saying before about the need to socialize it, and that there needs to be some behavioral change there as well. And Dr. Gary, I saw that you had your hand up, so perhaps you might like to expand a bit more on that, about some of the tips and the approaches that you've used to socialize the calculator in your country.
Thank you once again. So the to to be fair, because we are not yet using this calculator, I suppose that the behavior change has already somewhat begun in the private sector, with the realization of both the physical risks of climate change as well as the transition risks, and we have a bit of an interesting situation where some sectors are moving a bit faster than others with respect to behavioral change. And it's going to be interesting introducing the calculator as a means to what would you say, to display or to visualize, maybe that's a better word, to visualize the different levels of buy-in across the different sectors. So I think from that standpoint, we were actually rather enthusiastic about being able to introduce the calculator and to demonstrate how as the buy-in occurs across sectors and grows across sectors, that we might be able to see ourselves moving in specific directions at specific rates, so that we can ultimately paint a more complete picture about what we hope 2050 will look like. Thank you.
No, that's excellent. It's no, I think you touched on something quite interesting there about the private sector and the need for those voluntary and industry-led associations as well to try and drive some of these changes. That it doesn't necessarily, when we think about policymakers, doesn't have to just be government officials, but it is very much acting in concert and in partnership with those from the private sector and third sectors as well, because it's only, I think, through that collaboration does a more complete climate picture emerge. Okay, so there's we covered a number of the questions here, and I think just going back to that sectoral one, that's quite an interesting one. I think we only have about 2 minutes left, so it's probably have time for
have very short time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Very quick. But the 2050 calculators themselves, have they help to identify specific sectors that are most important for policymakers? So Mohammed, you mentioned that it challenged the assumptions about what clean coal technologies could do, and it said look at more renewables. But for other people on the call as well, how have the calculators been used to encourage policymakers to explore sectors in a different way?
I think I'll be interested to hear from the Malaysian perspective, because they are almost there. Gary, I don't know, would you like to react to that?
Thank you once again, and I appreciate the interest, but perhaps you didn't catch what I said. We really haven't had the opportunity to socialize this calculator with either the government or the private sector as yet. The current, like I said, with the current changes in government, we've had, of course, with the development of the NDC, we've had policy work in progress. But the interesting thing now is the fact that the private sector, in collaboration sometimes with civil society, have sort of come into their own in the realization about the climate risks in the immediate future, and so there are some initiatives that are moving in the private sector that are sort of in a bit of a twist, providing guidance back to policymakers. So the importance of stakeholder consultations between policymakers and the private sector and the public are becoming increasingly important. But once again,